Hi, my name is Thais Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about shame wounds. And I want to talk about the core wounds most related to shame, and I also want to go into like reprogramming tools for shame and talk about how we can find how much we are shaming ourselves or not, and really where shame comes from. And this is a really important video specifically for anybody who's struggling with chronic shame, which tends to be the more avoidant attachment styles overall. So usually our FAs and our DAs. So shame comes from many different potential places, but the biggest ones have to actually do with neglect or active shaming. And I want to break this down into two parts here. So the first reason we may struggle with shame as it relates to neglect is because our species is literally wired for attunement. We have a biological need for attunement, for closeness. And our species, more than most other species that exist, need to rely on their caregivers for survival for much longer. And what happens is when we grow up in a household where there's a lack of attunement and instead there's emotional neglect of some form, there's no like feeling of safety, like, oh, my caregiver's connected to me. They come to me when I cry. They're there for me. And you don't speak English or whatever your native language is. You only can conceive of your caregiver being there for you and you being able to trust and rely on your caregiver and get your needs met if they show up consistently. And if when you express emotion, they come towards you, they have approach-oriented behavior, they show up for you, they care for you. And when there's a disconnect emotionally, a caregiver's not engaged, not present, even like as you're aging throughout your early childhood, if you're not getting your emotional needs met, because we are wired for that as a child, you can't conceive of like why this is happening. So the childhood mind gives everything meaning. It personalizes everything. It's its way of like trying to adapt and survive in its environment. And so what happens is the childhood mind goes, okay, well, I have this need. It's really important to me. I'm starving for it. I'm not getting it. So it must be me. There must be something wrong with me. And here's one of our biggest wounds, which is I am defective. And this has so much to do with like a dismissive avoidance subconscious mind, their programming, their fears, so much of why they hide, because shame is the emotion that makes us want to hide and push other people away. And so you'll see the dismissive avoidance show up in their lives, creating all these walls so that you can't get too close and see that they are shameful at their core, which is not true at all. It's just like what the dismissive has acquired in terms of their beliefs about themselves because of the trauma of being neglected in childhood. Now, fearful avoidants have some of this as well, but they tend to get more of the active shaming. They tend to have more like authoritarian parents or critical parents, or see more chaos in the home, or just more volatility as a whole. And this usually leads them to like need to walk on eggshells a lot. So they feel like I am bad if I make a mistake and disrupt anything or create any more chaos in the home than there already is. And they are very sensitive to being shamed, right? Actively shamed, like bad, that was bad. Why did you do that? You are bad, right? And the more you'll see that dynamic, the more there's shame. Also, the more a child goes through extensive classical conditioning where there's extreme punishment and reward, the more a child feels like they have to earn their worth. And if you feel like you have to earn your worth, you don't feel like you're worthy at your core. So the big shame wounds we have are like, I am defective, I am bad, I am unworthy. And the more we have these wounds sort of running over and over again, the more these things are going to show up in our daily world, right? We come to believe these things about ourselves. We acquire these beliefs. And at a deep subconscious level, until we reprogram these beliefs, as a result of some of these traumas that may have happened, even small level traumas that were just consistent over time, until we reprogram these beliefs are a part of our sense of self. They're a part of our identity at a deep subconscious level. And so it's really important to recognize these things. Now, I want to look at the impact of shame. Shame makes us want to hide. It makes us think that we are full of flaws at the core and we don't want to let people in. Whenever somebody has a lot of shame wounds, we end up chronically shaming ourselves. We end up going through this whole dynamic of like, we make a mistake, and rather than being like, oh, I made a mistake, what led up to the mistake? Let me just inquire and then let me take accountability, and being like fairly neutral about our mistake. Instead, we see a mistake and we make it mean. It triggers these subconscious beliefs that go off that are like, oh, you made a mistake. It's because you're defective. It's because you're bad. It's because you're unworthy. And these really painful shame wounds sort of fire off. And because we've been imprinted by shame, and because the subconscious mind wants to maintain its comfort zone, we're quick to assign the shameful meaning to the external mistake or the potentially otherwise objective experience, right? You didn't get the job that you wanted in the interview. And it's not like, oh, hey, this was a really competitive interview and I just may not have been a good fit. It's like, no, it's because of me. I'm shameful. I'm unworthy. And so shame can have this massive impact, not just on us as an individual and our ability to succeed and show up and take accountability for mistakes in life, but can also profoundly affect our relationships and our ability to get close to people, to let people in. Sometimes when people are carrying a lot of chronic shame as well, they'll exaggerate their accomplishments, or they will, lie to avoid showing imperfections, or all these things that really at their core is truly just a coping mechanism to avoid feeling the emotion of shame that comes from the belief. And what you're really running from when you're trying to run from the emotion of shame is the uncomfortable sensations in your body. You're just literally running from sensations. And it's important to remember that, because we can shame ourselves so much and so profoundly, but it's like, hey, this is just somatic sensations in the body, or all that your emotions really are at the end of the day, that sort of reflect your thought patterns or belief patterns. And so when we're looking at these different dynamics, it's very powerful to work to do a shame audit and be like, how often am I shaming myself in my daily life? Where are these patterns showing up for me? And how can I start reprogramming these things and replace shame with perceiving how I'm sufficient, or I'm acceptable, I'm worthy of acceptance. My mistake is worthy of acceptance. It's okay to accept that I made a mistake. I'm a human. That's part of the human experience, rather than to put myself down and shame myself and give myself such a hard time. And so the more we can do that, and the more we can use repetition and emotion, what you're doing is you're firing and wiring new neural pathways of acceptance. And because neural pathways atrophy over time, if you, every time you go to shame yourself, replace it with like looking at why it's acceptable that you just made the mistake, or that you didn't get the job, or whatever it might be, and still take accountability and still inquire as to how you can improve, but not from a place of self-shaming, from a place of curiosity. Well, now through firing and wiring new neural pathways over time, through reframing your perspective to see why it's acceptable and what you can do, you can actually reprogram some of these shame patterns. Now, there's faster ways, and there's, of course, deep ways you can reprogram the core wounds of I am bad, I am unworthy, I am defective. And if you want to do a deeper dive, check out our emotional mastery course. You can check it out for free for 7 days by clicking the link in the description box below. And you can also, if you want to do a really deep dive into shame, do our reprogramming chronic guilt and shame course, because I think it's already enough that you go through any sort of trauma that has to do with shame in childhood once. And then to carry that with us over and over again on autopilot in many different forms, is sort of even more injustice that needs to be there. So not our fault, but definitely our responsibility to do the work if we see that we have these wounds, and we can take accountability and feel free of this and feel like we have stronger self-esteem as a byproduct of letting go of old chronic shame wounds, and feel more confident and comfortable around people and safer letting people in, and feeling not so harsh and critical towards ourselves when we do make a mistake, because we're humans and that's going to happen sometimes. So I hope this all makes a lot of sense. It's a really important topic. Again, you can check out those courses by clicking the link in the description box below. You can check them out for free for 7 days. And thank you for being here, and thank you for listening and watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.